Hi, I'm Erin Larkin. I'm here with John Jens. We're in my kitchen, so you may think this is 5 in 5. It's not. We cannot condense these wines into 5 minutes. We had the privilege of gaining some inside access to the new release Penfolds Grange, the 2016, and it occurred to us that perhaps we should be looking at this wine alongside some of its peers, not with the aim of saying that this one is better than this one or what have you, really just to say to you, Australia, and John's going to expand on this, but Australia makes some absolutely incredible Shiraz, of which these are 5 of the best. And so we just wanted to put them side by side, tell you how they taste in comparison to each other because they're very, very different, and hopefully scratch an itch of curiosity for us and maybe for you too.
Okay, so it's been a great chance to try them. Terrible morning, had no muesli left, had to have a few of these for breakfast, had to have something in my tummy. Now, where we're at. This is only my view, again, doesn't make it right. I reckon Australia's Chardonnays are perhaps 90% of the quality of the world's greatest. I reckon Australia's Cabernets are perhaps 90% of the best of Bordeaux. I reckon our Rieslings, now that we've got Jeffrey Grosset G110, the Walter, and some of the wines coming out of West Australia, we're perhaps 75% of the best of the German Rieslings. I reckon that our Pinot Noirs, with Bass Phillip on its own down in Eastern Victoria, probably 75% of the best of the world's Pinot, everyone else quite a way behind. Shiraz or Syrah, I reckon our greatest Shiraz, the Australis, the Hill of Grace, the Granges, from their greatest years over the last few decades, match the greatest wines of the Rhone. They're a totally different style. They're fuller, fleshier, stronger, more structured as compared to the leaner, finer, pepper and savoury, great length wines from Europe, some of the great names you can think of, but I reckon we match them. So I reckon these match the greatest of these labels, the greatest vintages, match the greatest wines out of Europe. Let's move on from there.
It's a really important point to start with. So there's no right order in which to do these. Certainly if we looked at density and weight, probably we would start with the Henschke because it is the finest and the most elegant.
It is.
And we would end with the Australis because it's the richest and the plushest and the softest and the most succulent. But we've decided to do it from vintage. So we have the 2017 Powell & Sons Flaxman's Vineyard Barossa Shiraz, 2016 Penfolds Grange, 2015 Torbreck The Laird, 2015 Henschke Hill of Grace, and 2015 Clarendon Hills Australis. And we're starting with the youngest wine. We're just starting on numbers. So in your glass here, John.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tell us, we did... So we've looked at this wine a couple of times over the last couple of months because we had the benefit of looking at it with Jeremy Oliver in December last year. It was one of his wines of the year, this vintage. On the nose, I get it's almost like a bacon fat maple kind of malt character coming from the oak. Now, I really like that because when you get the wine in your mouth, it's very savoury, very succulent at the same time. And it's actually got some beautiful elegance and I would say modernity about it.
Okay. For a starter, these are the most expensive wines in the country. So that our greatest Cabernets, we only have 1 or 2 Cabernets above $500. Some of these are $750 or $800. We have no Rieslings, no Chardonnays anywhere near this. No, there is one Pinot near it. So Australia, based on dollars alone, believes that these are our greatest wines. I find that the Powell & Son, because of that Eden Valley, the Flaxman Valley area... Oh,
I said Barossa earlier. That was incorrect. Sorry.
I wasn't picking you up. I
should have.
I'm not picking you up. I'm not... the 120-odd-year-old vines, I think you told me earlier, always, I think nearly always in the same family, has provided the backbone, as they say, for many of the great wines of the valley, but Powell & Son say never before bottled off under one label. More perfumed than any of the other wines that we've got here today. That could be the Eden Valley. And then the great length. And the Eden Valley, a little bit cooler than some of the Barossa wines, a little bit more structured, a little bit longer, lots of nuances of flavour, lovely oak handling there on either side, brilliant finish, brilliant aftertaste. A new label in the overall scheme of these other wines, but a lovely wine to start the tasting with, and a very, very good wine to start the tasting with.
I actually said modern earlier, but on the palate, that's typified by a real purity of fruit. There's a real clarity here, don't you think? The density and intensity is full on, don't get me wrong, but there's just a pure core of cassis and raspberry and just pure fruit in the centre of it, and it's beautiful. Understand why Jeremy falls over himself about this. I mean, it's gorgeous.
Yep. Jeremy picked for us last year a dozen of his great reds of the year. This was one of his keys within that. Erin, what I'd also like to add, which you and I have talked about before, these wines, I mentioned I did have them for breakfast. No muesli. So they've been open for a little while now. Now that we look at them, well, several hours. So now that we look at them again, Erin, they've opened out, as you and I both know they would, and softened and become gentler, more complex. This has developed wonderfully.
If ever there was a bigger reason for you to decant a wine, it's this. When we looked at them earlier, so we do that to get tasting notes, because in the link in the information below, we've got an article in there, and that's got all of the vineyard information, a little bit about the history of each of the wines, plus tasting notes. But it's important to get a handle on what we think the wines taste like prior to talking to you, so that we know what we're talking about. Because I know this is rehearsed, this is just us discussing, so it really is important that we looked at them. So
this is not rehearsed.
It never is. But so these are, very, very different now to what they were this morning, and for the better. Moving on to the second wine. So this is the 2016 Penfolds Grange. The embargo for media was lifted this morning on July 23rd, which is why you're now watching this video. It's not released for another month or so in August. This is one of the, we're looking at 5 great Shiraz releases throughout the year, but this is one of the great Shiraz releases of the year. Certainly highly anticipated. And I have to tell you a very quick story about Grange for me, because I had the, I'm going to say, honour, luck, fortune of drinking more Grange than I deserved before I really understood the pedigree and the complexity of what I was consuming. And so I was able to look at these wines and make my thoughts about them, but I had never had old Grange, and so my picture wasn't complete, even though I had a run of the earlier vintages. And I said to John, I think they're beautiful. The fruit intensity and the winemaking, none of that can be argued. It doesn't matter what your preference in wine style is. They are unbelievable Rolls-Royce examples of Shiraz. That's a given. But I didn't understand the majesty of them because I hadn't had an old Grange. And I've had some old Grange now. I'm very fortunate to have had a number of them. And they become these majestic, graceful, I'm not going to say ethereal, but they're moving in that direction, incredibly elegant wines that just make you stop talking, sit down and think about them as you drink them. You have no choice to do anything else. It's just how it is with old Grange. So if you're in the same boat that I was, I don't know how you're going to do it, but try and track down some old Grange and drink it with some friends, because it really is a transcendental Shiraz experience, and it really does illuminate the beauty of Grange on release.
Okay, so I'm 71. My father had a great cellar. He had a great cellar of Grange. Dozens and dozens and dozens of Grange. And apart from that, by the time I was 23 or 24, I had 15 dozen Grange of my own. Now that's in an era, I'm told, when they only made it 1,000 dozen Grange a year. I'm a fanatic, and have been since I was 22 or 23, a Penfolds and a Grange fanatic. So in that era, Grange were on their own as a single greatest wine, clearly that Australia made, white or red. People like Hugh Johnson, the Southern Hemisphere's only first growth. I have had hundreds and hundreds of Granges, and I love them. Despite the fact that those wines in the past were great and idiosyncratically Penfolds and idiosyncratically Australian, in a master lineup you picked them as Penfolds every time, you picked them as Australian every time, despite the fact that they were so good and so great, and despite Hugh Johnson's comment, which many other people concurred with, the wines today under Peter Gago's team have never been better. Across the board, Penfolds are making great wines. In this instance, this is big, not as big as a couple of the others, structured, powerful, long, imposing, just extraordinary length. This, make no mistake, in political terms, they use that term all the time, make no mistake, this is a great wine. I love it. The 2015, I actually in general prefer the 2015 Shiraz out of South Australia, out of that Barossa and McLaren Vale in the Hills region, and preferred the Cabernets slightly from 16. This is a great wine in my book. I'm at 19.3, 19.4. I reckon it's a truly great wine. I think it's marvellous.
When I start writing about a wine, I have a very clear way, well, it presents itself in a very clear way to me, so I write in a similar fashion for each wine, except for Grange, and also the 389, which we looked at, because I can't, for some reason, when they're young, unpick them from the front. I tend to have to go to the back and talk about the finish and all of the things and work my way up to the very front of the palate. There's just something about them. They're so incredibly polished and sophisticated and smooth and all these things. It can be difficult to unpick in their youth. It doesn't matter what kind of wine you like. It doesn't matter whether you're a Pinot drinker or a Shiraz drinker. It doesn't. This has an unmistakable fruit quality and a profile about it that you don't get in other wines, and I just find it to be incredibly impressive every single time I drink it. The 2016 is immaculate. It is a collector's wine. It's certainly gone up in price again this year. It's $950 a bottle, but it is unbelievable. And with the pedigree of these wines and their known ability to age for decades and decades and decades. I mean, we had the 1964 with Peter Gago in 2014.
I think the following year we had the 55 as well.
Right. So, I mean, they really age for as long as you want them to. So, an incredible one.
So I just want to add context, and we often talk about it, context is really important. We're lucky enough to try the great wines of the world often. I know we're isolated, I know we're out in Western Australia, we've still got some great cellars out here. We look at some great wines. That belongs right up there with them. That is one of the world's great wines from this era. That is that good.
Agree. Now, moving into the third wine, we have the 2015 Torbreck The Laird. This is a very, very different nose, which is good because we want them all to have their own personalities, as they do. To me, this has a real... so Torbreck are really... I would suggest quite a modern producer making traditional wine, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This, to me, tastes like the Barossa that I remember, and I find it deeply satisfying for that reason. There's a real kind of savoury tomato, and I'm not saying tomato leaf, I mean ripe heirloom tomato character. It's salty and spicy, and there's pomegranate and raspberry. It's if you've been to the Barossa and it's hot and you know it's hot and there's like a gentle breeze that blows, it's a very fragrant breeze. It kind of blows off the dust and it blows off the vines, and it's just got this smell about it, and I find it incredibly evocative, and this actually captures that.
Blows me away too.
I think it does, I like it.
Okay, so Australia's fortunes in wine were based on Syrah or Shiraz. It's what we took to the world. Any wholesaler overseas, any importer overseas who wanted to buy Australian wines went to the Australian producer and said, do you have Shiraz? I've got to have Australian Shiraz. That's what people want. This is the sort of reason why. This Torbreck is built on that. The wines were big, soft, juicy, ripe, quite a bit of alcohol, textured, balanced and long. This is a refined and developed version of that, in my opinion. It's building on that. Some of the others aren't that style. I reckon they've taken pride in this and said, we're going to do it better. I would add, we have restaurants and wine stores. One of the greatest responses that we get from people is that when we have A ripe, soft, gentle, plump but restrained, textural, seamless, lovely finish, lovely aftertaste, Barossa Shiraz. These guys aren't all Barossa because there's Hills material in here as well, but they're expressions of that. People love Barossa Shiraz at its best. This is one of the very, very best.
I understand why.
Now, for me, again, round, balanced, full, almost viscous. It's not sweetness. Viscosity is different to sweetness. There's a bit of viscosity, fleshing it out, making it round, making it a touch bigger, partially from the alcohol, and then just gradually drifts away beautifully. Absolute crowd pleaser. And nearly whenever, I could say whenever because I'm not quite sure, but almost whenever we serve, and we sell quite a bit of Torbreck in our restaurants, the feedback is fantastic. People love the style, love the way it's made, and love drinking it.
It's kind of unapologetically Barossa, and I think if that's what you want, then that's where you head. And just drinking it as we're talking is very, very pleasurable.
You're drinking it?
I am.
Just kidding. Okay.
It's beautiful. So moving into the Hill of Grace. So aromatically, this is a completely different beast to all of the wines that we have here today. And it's also the finest in terms of weight and expression. And I think
You've got my glass there.
No, I don't.
I want them both.
I do not. I've been vocal in my thoughts on this wine. I gave this vintage 99 points. I just struggle to see how it could be any more pleasurable, any more nuanced, any more polished, any more beautiful, and any more expressive of the Eden Valley. If I was wealthy, I would drink this all of the time. I would drink it when it was young. I would drink it when it was old. I would just drink it. I love it.
Absolutely sensational. I too am on record in print as saying it's one of the few greatest Australian wines, white or red, I've ever seen. And I don't mean in the few dozen, I mean in the 2 or 3 or 4 greatest Australian wines I've ever seen. Absolutely love it. Finer and more elegant than the past. Almost subliminal oak handling, which I see a little bit in Mount Mary, which I see a little bit sometimes in the Cullen's vineyards. Brilliant oak handling, just length, finish, aftertaste, slight herbal character for complexity, length. I love it. Stunning. Don't tell Erin. 1970 vintage, 6 bottles, first wine I ever cellared.
Really?
Yep.
Nice choice. Nice going.
She did here, obviously.
I really do love that. And then in the final glass, we've got the Clarendon Hills Australis Syrah 2015. I'm going to be straight out and tell you that this is a wine that has eluded me for many, many years. I've always loved the Clarendon Hills Grenache, the Onkaparinga and the Clarendon. I just think they are incredibly delicious and beautiful styles of a variety that I'm totally in love with from a region that I think does it incredibly well. The Australis, like I say, I've never been lucky enough to have it before this morning. And when we decided that we would do this, I said, well, we've got to do Australis as well. And I'm so pleased because if McLaren Vale Shiraz and Syrah is your thing, you'll know what I mean when I say there's like a real blackberry pie kind of creaminess to the wines that come from there. They're incredibly succulent, and I use that word a lot, but that's only because when you see me, I'm talking about the wines that I love, and that's a wine tray that I love. So they're incredibly succulent and plush, but they also have acidity and balance and finesse about them, which this does. So this is like the softest, most cushioned wine in the lineup, and really I think if you were going to drink any of them early, this is probably the one that you would want to do that with because it just is so beautiful now. But I am told that Old Australis is a pretty magnificent experience, so also hold it if you can.
Okay, so among the things that I love about wine is Erin's terminology. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. We'll just run the cameras back a bit. Just kidding. Blackberry pie creaminess. Listen to the rest she said. Never heard that before about wine, but it probably fits. Australis, legendary. Not legendary necessarily in Australia because almost no one knows about it. Australian wine writers.
It's difficult to track down a current review, is all we're saying.
Australian wine writers don't write them up. They're not great fans of Roman and Alex and what they do for whatever given reason, but whatever it is, the wines are fantastic. Erin mentioned the Grenaches. The Grenache, and we've had them back over 10 or 15 or 20 years. The Grenaches, at their best, certainly until now, with one possible exception, have probably been Australia's greatest Grenaches. I love them. With age, they're stunning. The fruit that Roman Protasio puts into his wines is extraordinary. They are great wines. I can tell you, and perhaps I shouldn't here, but it doesn't make any difference whether you look at Robert Parker, whether you look at the Wine Spectator, or you look at some of the European wine writers. They give higher points more consistently to Australis than to either Grange or Hill of Grace. Almost unbelievable, you think, heretical, you think, whatever it is. I once averaged them out over 5 years, 10 years and 15 years, the points from each. And over the 5-year period, the 10-year period and the 15-year period, Australis averaged higher points from some of the world's greatest wine writers than either of these, and these are great wines. These are classically structured, different oak, but classically structured. This is bigger, fuller, rounder, softer, gentler, seamless, so less structured. It is a crowd pleaser. Almost anyone who has that just says, oh my God, I just love that wine. It's sensational. So totally different styles. In fact, each of the 5 of these, totally different styles to each other. I love the wine as well. I'll perhaps give a touch more points to these two because of that classical structure, which I love. If I was going to have a dinner party tonight, that's the wine I'd take. No, actually, I don't know if that's correct. That's too hard to say. Yeah. I would take that as well. Let's put it that way. I reckon these are great wines. Love them.
They're like 5 points on a star. I mean, they're equally valuable and equally important to the composition of that star, but they are all pointing in different directions and they're just beautiful. And if any of these have been on your radar to collect, money aside, and I hope it's money aside because, I mean, you're fortunate if that's the case, I would say any and all of these are utterly glorious and worthy of a space in your cellar.
And so as time goes on and we get better technology, which the people in the past didn't have, let's assume, a better oak selection, let's assume that these have never been, these labels over the last couple of years have never been better. So these are amongst the greatest examples of Australian Shiraz, which most people believe is Australia's greatest wine, and the prices indicate that you can find. These are great wines.
They are, and it's quite humbling to have them all in front of us together at one time today, and I feel incredibly grateful for the experience, honestly, because I've had, apart from the Australis, which I've been open about, I have had all of these on a number of occasions separately, but never in context. And to put a wine amongst its peers and to be able to look at it in the context of its peer group is just a great honour.
Yeah, and context again is so important. I've probably done 24 vertical tastings of either 10 or 15 Granges at a time. It helps you fill in all the gaps on wine over the years. It's just, and then to see these are even better.
Something that we clocked onto earlier because it wasn't part of the intention, but it just became evident while we were talking about them. With the exception of the Grange, each of these 4 wines are single vineyard wines, and so they will never come from anywhere else other than where they come from now, which is, I think, a really exciting thing because we talk about vintage expression and how they look each year. These wines are clear products of the years in which they were grown. Penfolds has the ability to operate more like a champagne house in that they have access to brilliant growers with relationships that they've been fostering for many years. They have the money and the finances to purchase the very best of the fruit from those great vineyards, and they put it into these wines. So you know that with the exception of, is it just McGill Estate that's the single vineyard? Everything else is a blended wine, is that correct?
I think so, yeah. Of the reds. Yeah.
Yes, that the wines from Penfolds are like skimming the cream off the top of everything that's available in that year, and so they have a very, very clear house style which is imprinted on all of their wines, never more so than this Grange. So, look.
Imposing, statuesque, Fine, elegant, lingering, classy. Soft, gentle, round, seamless. Full, unapologetic, the traditional, magnificent Barossa style that made Australia famous, but a development and even more complex and richer than some of the wines in the past, but while toned down and restrained in certain ways. Length, elegance, structure, light perfume, brilliantly done. Just a great chance to see some great wines. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening and watching. I hope that this has helped you, or at least demystified a little bit about these wines. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It really helps me. And until we come up with the next fabulous wine tasting idea, we hope that you enjoy this. And if you need any of the information about these wines, there is the article below, and it's got hopefully everything that you could possibly want in it. So until next time, thank you.
And I wasn't trying to pinch her glass.